I used to run the Crown Prosecution Service. I was Director of Public Prosecutions. Director of Public Prosecutions.
He wants you to know about these 5 years in his career, the job for which he was knighted.
I've taken down terrorist gangs in my past.
It's a far cry from his years as a human rights lawyer, which the Tories want you to focus on. We caught up with Kier Starmer as he campaigned in Basingstoke to ask more about the big job he never misses a moment to name drop. Did it change your outlook on the world?
Yes, it did. I went from being a lawyer litigating on the outside,
Lefty lawyer, people would say.
knocking on the sort of window of the institution saying you need to change, to then running the Crown Prosecution Service and being responsible for every prosecution in England and Wales. Yes, that changed me.
2011, there were riots in London and Salford. The government wanted a crackdown, and Kier Starmer, as Director of Public Prosecutions, threw himself into the task. It meant some with clean records, swept along by events, went to jail.
It was important for us to show...
No regrets?
That there are no regrets. It was very important that we got control of that situation and showed the criminal justice system could respond.
But a lot of people went behind bars for really minor offences.
But the prosecutor doesn't decide on the conviction. The prosecutor simply puts the case before the court. And the court then looks at it in the round and says, is that the appropriate charge? Are they guilty of it? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's for the court then to... I don't apologise for being robust in response to crime.
The Conservative government, Kier Starmer's political masters at the time, gave him full marks for delivering tough justice.
Kier Starmer showed no sign of disagreeing with the view that if you get a breakdown in public order, you need to be seen to be able to deliver tough and at the same time rapid justice if you want to stop the behaviour that's taking place.
He wasn't squeamish, he wasn't balking.
No.
Nazir Afzal worked with Kier Starmer as Chief Crown Prosecutor for the northwest of England.
He comes with this reputation as a human rights, left-wing, left-leaning lawyer. Did you watch him change in front of your own eyes in the job?
100%. I mean, there were occasions when he was more robust than I was.
Hard line.
On cases that should be prosecuted, the charges that should be preferred, where I had a particular view about the charge, and he would say, one up. One up, you know, slightly more higher charge than the one that you're preferring.
You'd say, one up, tougher charge.
Yes, we had those cases.
His memory is that you got too tough.
No, he's wrong about that. They were tough charges, but we were facing a very difficult situation.
Back in 2010, it was the Tories who got elected on a change slogan. They pushed austerity. And while the Labour movement came out and protested, at the Crown Prosecution Service, Kier Starmer was implementing 27% cuts.
Kier Starmer delivered that fully, slightly ahead of schedule.
Yes.
Enthusiastically, no pushback.
No pushback, and he put his shoulder to the wheel to try and deliver. Now, that's not to say that it was
austerity.
He delivered an austere service which was functional.
And he gets a Tory minister's approval.
Yes.
There was the Labour Party on the streets protesting against austerity, and you were getting 5-star awards from a Tory minister inside implementing austerity.
Well, it does mean that I've got first-hand experience of what it means to inflict austerity on a public service, which is why I'm determined we'll never do it again.
Back then, Kier Starmer was the outside witness, giving evidence to MPs on a select committee.
So there's been a restructure to fewer areas, a reduction in headcount.
As Director of Public Prosecutions, he reformed a failing public service and made it work for people again.
A recent Labour campaign ad boasts of how Kier Starmer became a master of public sector reform at the CPS. But some feel the cuts outlined in his annual reports, peppered with the jargon of austerity, were deeply flawed, saving a fortune by giving top talent lawyers voluntary redundancy.
The easiest thing to do to reduce your budget would be to get rid of your most expensive staff. Your most expensive staff are your most experienced staff. And so that was the biggest failure. The biggest failure was real experience walked out the door. There wasn't much of a handover. There was a loss of corporate knowledge, all of that. It was a mistake. There's no getting away with it.
As public sector reform goes, it would be in a textbook how not to do it.
How not to do it, 100%.
I would dispute that. Firstly, we had to make cuts, and therefore this is hard. You know, we had to shut offices and build bigger hubs, do things differently. These are not easy choices to make.
Some claim the euphemisms and corporate speak of the CPS annual reports conceal a darker reality.
There were people around me who were falling. There was no getting away from it. You know, I did a survey not long after that where, you know, drink levels were going up, mental health issues were clearly evident. The well-being of people around me was suffering. When you are doing more work with less people, that's going to happen.
People were dropping, they were overworked, they were turning to drink. There were things going wrong in the system.
Well, look, the thing about the Crown Prosecution Service or any public service, you've got an inspectorate who can look in at what you're doing. At the end of my 5-year tenure, there was the offer to me to continue. So people were pleased with the change and the progress that we were making.
One of Kier Starmer's proudest achievements as DPP is his work on crimes against women.
This is something that Rape Crisis introduced me to.
Here, explaining why victims needed to be treated with special care.
Think of your best ever sexual experience. Your best. Turn to the person to your left and tell them what it was. It is really difficult to even mention what your best ever sexual experience is. Imagine having to tell one person after another about the worst.
Kier Starmer says his focus on victims proves a common thread to his public life.
Some people will look at this part of your career and see another pattern. There you are, the lefty human rights lawyer, and then you become a, to some eyes, draconian, hardline DPP, and then you come into the Labour Party and you're off with Jeremy Corbyn, and then you're the figure we see before us now who's throwing Jeremy Corbyn out of the party. There's a zigzag.
Well, let me challenge that. So this idea that only if you're knocking on the door or the window of the institution are you progressive, but if you're inside, you're not. I don't apologise. I'm afraid I've spoken to too many families who've lost their children, too many women and girls who've been subjected to physical violence, abuse and sexual violence to think that it's anything other than progressive to fight for their cause.
The country's top civil servants arriving for their weekly meeting in Whitehall. For 5 years in the grandeur of the Cabinet Office, Kier Starmer joined them round that table.
You attended the Wednesday morning colleagues meeting with all the perm sex.
Yeah, every Wednesday.
But you'll be the first one to have, as it were, come out of that room, albeit by a circuitous journey, and gone into the door of number 10.
I think that's right. And it was an important part of what I did before I came into politics.
You've known a lot of permanent secretaries, the top mandarins. You've sat in those meetings. You might come with a sort of better disposition towards them. You don't see them as Sir Humphreys or you know, desiccated bowler hat wearing civil servants. So do you have a different view of them, do you think?
I think I do, because this was an hour dedicated once a week to a very high level discussion about public services in all the different departments.
You didn't see a politician in the making?
No,
when
not at all. Not at all. I was quite surprised when I heard.
He just looked like an official.
It looked to me to be exactly what I expected, really, which was an extraordinarily dedicated public official.
It's been said in the biography that was done recently that you don't particularly warm to the political class, you don't particularly warm to political journalists, fair enough. It is said in that biography. But I wonder whether you have a bit more respect, warmth towards the top class of public officials that you used to sit in that room with.
I enjoyed working in that environment. That's why I enjoyed the challenges and the changes that we made in the Crown Prosecution Service.
But when you're in the room, if you were to be Prime Minister and you're sitting in the room, you might sort of look across, lean in more to the senior official than maybe some of your predecessors, because you have a bit more respect for them.
Well, I've got respect, but in terms of the sort of lean in, this isn't going to be easy, because if we have a Labour government, I intend that we reform our public services.
If I'd asked you what his politics were as you worked alongside him as DPP, what would you have guessed?
Left of centre, largely because of his human rights history, but confused a little bit. So, You know, there were, as I said, he was more draconian in some cases than I was. The fact that he, delivered the budget cuts so readily, so I would have perhaps thought maybe Liberal Democrat or something.
11 years ago, the Liberal Democrat Cabinet Minister Chris Huhne watched this long walk to camera. Keir Starmer was announcing he was being charged with perverting the course of justice. He thinks the flame of political ambition already burnt within Keir Starmer back then.
Good morning. Mr. Huhne, having allegedly committed a speeding offence, falsely informed the investigating authorities that Ms. Price was the driver of the vehicle in question.
What did you think when you saw that?
My legal team were outraged because they basically said nobody gets treated like this. This is prejudicial to any potential result of a trial.
Him coming out in front of the cameras.
Him coming out and basically they thought he was grandstanding.
He says you were grandstanding and shouldn't have done that on the telly.
He's wrong about that. I believed that public confidence in decision making would be enhanced if we publicly announced what we were going to do and why we were going to do it.
I think he had his eye on the ball already to try and get a seat in the House of Commons. It was pretty ruthless. But then, actually, do we want a Prime Minister who is not ruthless? I mean, the reality is that if you're going to get that high up the greasy pole, you're not going to be Mother Teresa.
A ruthlessness one MP questioning the DPP a decade ago might now feel well acquainted with.
Could you tell us how the guidelines are operating at the present time?
Well, I haven't picked up any problems yet.
He's often dubbed a technocrat with a shifting political centre, but his poll numbers aren't shifting. We may soon discover what he really learnt from 5 years in high public office.